Given that economics is typically an objective field, have you met resistance with applying religion? How's your research in religion and economics shaped your spiritual outlook, if it has at all?
Yeah, well, okay. So I can answer both those questions. And they're a little separate. So the first question is yes. I mean, I've met a little resistance for sure, because so as you say, economics is what we call a positive science as opposed to a normative science. We're trying to explain the way the world is. We're not trying to explain the way we think the world should be. That is where all my research lies. I'm not somebody who's trying to justify religion or come against religion. I'm trying to understand the role that religion has played in economic development. Religion is one of the most kind of idiosyncratic. It's the not idiosyncratic. It's more pervasive, I should say, most pervasive cultural things we have in our history. As people, that it's obvious it must have played some role in economic development one way or the other, right? So as positive social scientists, as people that want to understand the way the world is, it is a question that is worth asking, even if it might upset some people, right? So yes, I mean, a lot of my research has been on the Islamic world, and what have argued, and again, it's not just just making an argument without backing it up. I have plenty of support for the arguments. Is that it's not so much Islam itself that caused the reversal of fortunes between the Middle East and Western Europe, which there was. So, after the spread of Islam, the Middle East was far ahead of Europe for centuries, economically,
Yeah, like in the 8th,
scientifically.
ninth century, the advent of
Yeah,
algebra and so
yeah,
much else.
for
Yeah,
sure.
the
Medicine.
golden age of Islam. Yeah.
Yeah, for about 400 years, there's a golden age of Islam after it spread in the 7th century. There's a clear reversal of fortunes, though. Industrialization doesn't happen in the Middle East. The Middle East falls far behind Western Europe, and there was a long tradition of social scientists that would look at, or that essentially blamed Islam, said there's something about Islam, and that kind of never really sat well with me, mainly because it has a hard time explaining why Islam was so far ahead for so long. Um, but then looking into it, reading, doing economic research on it, the argument I was able to put forth was that it's not so much Islam itself, but it's the role that Islam has played in politics that has played a role in its relative underdevelopment. And this is something that switched over time. Eventually, Christianity, while it was obviously also really important in the medieval church in medieval politics, it
It was separated from
eventually
the government.
it eventually became, yeah. So eventually you get parliaments rising, and it's the economic elites have more power, and you start getting policies that are more in their favor. And that really doesn't have anything to do necessarily, it has, little to do with the content of Islam, but not really. It's not really, the content of the religions that matters as much here. But that was something that, I definitely got pushback from, because, some people don't want to believe that some people don't even really want to believe that there's any reversal of fortunes, which I think is on the face of it ridiculous. But, others
Yeah,
certainly don't want to believe that religion in any way, shape, or form might have contributed to the economic divergence. And I
because
think,
it's something
when,
held to such a high standard at those places.
well, it's also something that people really, strongly believe in, and they don't want to believe that there could be anything negative associated with religion. And that this is obviously isn't just true of Islam. There's plenty of negative to do with every religion. I think there's plenty of positive to do with any religion as well. Um, but this is a question, though, that we can't ignore, just because it might make some people, including possibly ourselves, feel uncomfortable. And when you ask me about my spiritual, whether it affected me spiritually, I'll just tell you, I've always been interested in religion, but I myself am not religious. Or I'd consider myself atheist, or most agnostic, but probably atheist. But I've always been fascinated by religion, and in fact, because I'm atheist, because I don't understand it. I don't understand the appeal, but I also understand that it clearly has an appeal. I mean, you said, it's one of the things that I think makes us human, is that we have these types of beliefs. Whether you go back to even pre-organized religions, and then religion, we have a capacity to believe in the supernatural. We have a capacity to believe things that are unprovable, and they really help shape our lives and the way we think. And it would be ridiculous to say that religion does not affect the way most people in human history have perceived the world. And so that has been something that I've always wanted to know more about. So I took a ton of religion classes in my undergrad. And then when I went to grad school, I didn't think I would be able to study it, but then it just so happened that one of the professors there who became my advisor had done some work in religion, and kind of showed me the ropes there. And I've been studying it ever since. It hasn't affected the way I personally believe, because this is something that I'm able to separate. It's my own belief from the way from analyzing the way that humans act and interact. That's what economics is, at least what microeconomics is. And this is something that I think we should always be willing to change our beliefs when there's new evidence that's put forth. But the type of evidence that I try to accumulate in my own research has nothing to do with, say, proving the existence of God, or showing whether religious faith is something that, or affecting the way I perceive the world. But I do think it's really important to understand how it affects the types of actions, especially the economic actions of people and societies.
I think, yeah, and we can totally relate to like that feeling of like the lack of feeling of religion drives the curiosity in it because you know its impacts, but you can't necessarily feel them. So you study it in like an objective field to kind of want to gauge the impacts on something you can measure because you can't feel it. At least that's like what we've taken from it. Um,
Yeah, I
and
think that's a good way of putting it. And
I
I
think
mean,
it's
I
also
had a similar path.
like building off, it's not only that, but it's also an individual drive. I mean, if this thing is such a huge part of our, society culture, as Stephen, you have said, then I mean, it only makes sense to at least try to understand this primal driving force. Like what we've always had religion. We've had animism as hunter-gatherers, and then polytheism, monotheism, and now even, you can argue secularism is a new form of religion. So I think it's important just to study that for the sake of
Hmm.
it's just a part of humanity.
Yeah, absolutely.
and like
That's
it's
where I
kind of
came down
interesting,
on
like
for
even
sure.
though you study like these relationships between like the economy and religion and kind of like how it lies within like even though like the research is objective and I understand that, have there been any times where you just like find something out or like you're just doing like I don't know, a literature review or just historical review based on some regions and you think to yourself like wow and then like kind of like relate that to your own spiritual understanding or are you really disconnected from that?
Um, I've certainly had many things where I've, read something that I didn't know before and was completely unexpected and thought, wow, that's fascinating. I will say, I mean, it's never really affected what I would say is my own spiritual journey. I mean, again, because most of the type of stuff that I'm interested in reading it's really historical and understanding the paths that these societies have taken, both religious paths, but also the economic paths. At the end, I am an economist, and that's the type of research I'm interested in doing. So no, I mean, I'd say that, and it's not that, and I would say it's not that I'm dogmatic in my own stance. I'm not. I certainly would consider myself an atheist, but I'm also not. I'm open to understanding. Again, why people believe, and if I'd like to think that if something I were to come across something that was fundamental to the way I would view things, I might be able to change my viewpoint on that, but I have not, and I probably won't. Would be my guess, because I think that, and specifically the type of research I'm interested in is much more, kind of trying to link these kind of long run religious trends with long run economic trends. Um, a lot of that's not really going to be the type of stuff that affects one's spirituality, but again, it's I think that it's important to keep our minds open to these types of things. And I've certainly changed my opinions on the linkages between religion and economics and vice versa, based on my own and really the research of others as well. That has been, when something's convincing, you should always try to change your priors.
Yeah. I mean, the open mind is like kind of probably the thing that's most important in research. Once you have a closed mind about something, you can't perform well research, a good
Yeah.
research on it because you suffer from so many biases, and also just keeping an open mind allows you to research like just well, like it's just like the fundamental pillar of
Yeah.
It's the
um
scientific method. I mean, you have to start with a question. You have to be willing to accept the results.
Yep. Yep.
yeah.
That's right.